Hi, this is Chris Howard, host of Plugged In with Chris Howard, and I'm taking the Lions over the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. BetOnline has free odds and lines available online or on your mobile device. Visit BetOnline today.
Welcome to the Media Roundtable Industry Edition. If you've been keeping up with us, we've spent the last few years talking to leading voices in podcasts about what they create, why they create it, and the impact they want to have on the world. This is a true roundtable format, and like we say in the name, this is our industry edition. So it's going to be less focused on creators and more about how media and audio industry experts can adapt to the news of the day. Today, I am your host, Kristen Duenas, Associate Media Director at Oxford Road, and I'm joined by Neal Lucey, EVP of Strategy and Product.
Hello, everybody.
And Gary Brown, Director of Growth.
Hi, everyone.
All right, Gary, Neal, welcome back to the Media Roundtable. Let's get into it. So, first things first, what do we got?
All right, our first story is about TikTok, right, Kristen?
It is. Ad buyers at IAB Newsfront amid scrutiny.
Yeah, I'm curious about this because there's a bill in Congress it has an acronym. The acronym is called RESTRICT. And it's a bill that would basically force ByteDance to kind of sell off its U.S. assets. I think, interestingly enough, I think that it would give a lot of power over any social media platform that had more than 1 million consumers, where Congress can take action to potentially shut that down. But to me, I think about TikTok and how it's taken off, and maybe a question for you is, we think about what we do in audio and how TikTok potentially relates to what we do in audio, because it's not necessarily always kind of like a straight line to how it can kind of aid or influence what we do, especially with podcasts.
Right. So more and more, we're finding that the podcasters that have the highest amount of performance, a lot of it is driven because they are simulcast on platforms like YouTube. And what can help drive, those viewers to go to YouTube is cross-promoting on TikTok, Instagram. Back in the day, it would have been Vine. So all of these short form places that kind of say, well, if you want more content, if you want the longer version, go to here. And with the potential of having a ban on TikTok, it's going to be a boon, I think, for the Instagrams and the YouTubes of the world, because they're going to get a lot of those viewers back. In some cases, they weren't necessarily driving those longer views because people like short form. But in the case where people want more content, that's where they're going to benefit. And I think that I don't think there's going to be a ban. I really don't. I think that there's going to be some sort of compromise, because we did this back in 2020 as well, and nothing really happened. And I think that's just, there's a precedent of nothing really happening. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, one thing about the bill in Congress is it is bipartisan, although I think there's some second guessing or some second thoughts about how restrictive it could potentially be and whether it's actually going to be a good thing or not. But I think it's just an interesting development, and we'll see what happens with it. I think, Gary, you have some thoughts on this as well.
I have a lot of thoughts on TikTok, excuse me. First off, I made my first TikTok video with my girlfriend a couple of weeks ago, and it didn't get very many views. So I'm a little frustrated. But from the advertising side of things and the congressional back and forth and all the hysteria around it, the older, more cynical Gary thinks, like, why is there such opposition? Is it because all of the lobbyists and Congress, people in Congress are tied to Twitter or tied to Meta and Google and invested in those platforms and are tight with Peter Thiel, who also invested in those platforms. And TikTok's coming in, and it's this emerging platform that everyone uses. Even my parents are using TikTok. And are they upset that ad dollars and revenue are going to be shifted from Meta, Google, Twitter over to TikTok? And are they trying to use any means possible to stop that and create doubt? That's kind of my thing, follow the money.
Gary Brown.
When the CEO of TikTok was being when he was
grilled in Congress.
When he was testifying in front of Congress a couple of weeks ago, the night before, he had a private dinner with a lot of congressmen. He had the dinner included Peter Thiel and a lot of other tech investors that have interests in companies that are going to now be competing for dollars with TikTok. So it may be true, it may not be true, but my sense is follow the money and see who's robbing Peter to pay Paul and that sort of thing.
I like that you came in with the conspiracy theory angle versus
what's
going to happen with all of our data going to China.
Listen, if how many times have you looked on or said something and then gone on to Instagram or Facebook and seen an ad immediately following for that product that you were talking about?
Oh, 100%. Yes.
And if they really want to know where you are, they're going to know where you are, regardless.
This is true, and this isn't anything new, right? We know that China sells apps that, like the Facetune app, they were, there was a whole thing behind that. And so having them have a share of TikTok, it's like all of everybody's information is already out there, for better or for worse. And so using this as the excuse, I guess you can make that reach and say, okay, well, buy into the conspiracy. It's actually not the whole Chinese thing, and it's more just the other platforms. You could go that route, but I think either way, bringing it back, to podcast is going to be, it'll be interesting, A, to see what happens, and B, what happens if TikTok goes away, what happens to the other platforms, and really how does that affect any performance that we have for those podcasts who are simulcast and who were using TikTok. Are we going to see an uptick? Are we going to see, a downward trend? Is nothing going to happen? So I think, we're just going to have to keep an eye on it and hope for the best.
Yeah, to me, the interesting component is that virtuous circle with the podcasters and them being influencers and being able to take their content and reach new audiences via the likes of TikTok or YouTube. And then also by reaching those new audiences, get more listeners for their podcasts, which benefits us. And I think it's interesting. It's not specific to TikTok, but our media team did a recent audit of a client prospect, and they found that 30% of the shows that were renewed had a YouTube simulcast versus 8% that didn't. So clearly, being able to have that video component, be it YouTube or repurposing content into onto TikTok and using that short form content really does pay dividends to the podcast itself, right?
In the end.
Yeah.
No, I think it's of a piece, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think, we're just going to have to wait and see yet again. But I remain hopeful. I don't think anything's going to happen. So we'll see.
Just so 4 of the top 5 apps are Chinese.
Of course.
And also, I don't know where we're going to go next on the TikTok conversation, but I just want to add one point that their revenue in 2022 is up 30% year over year, now surpassing $80 billion.
Wow.
Or excuse me, 80 million.
I was like, 80 billion. I'm like, that's
80
not
million.
Chunk of change. Like, it's the difference of a few zeros. Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on from TikTok. Neal, tell us something new.
All right. I'm going to talk about radio, forgotten child of audio. practically. So there is a recent Ad Age article that piqued my attention because I think it's a conversation that we have a lot with our clients, and sort of there's I think a reluctance to jump into radio, especially we're focused on performance. We're a performance agency, and radio is one of those places where it's still really pretty difficult to prove performance, I think, at least from a direct response perspective. So this article caught my attention. It was an Ad Age, and it was about a CPG giant, I think that we probably all have heard about, which is Procter & Gamble, and how they are leaning into radio in a big way. So the article cited data from Vivix, which, if you haven't heard of Vivix, don't be afraid, because it's actually Kantar's ad intelligence platform has been rebranded to Vivix. And based on data that was pulled from that platform, P&G increased their ad spend in radio by 43% in 2022 to $235 million. So a huge increase in spend. And the article cited a couple of reasons for that. And one is P&G has mass brands. They want to reach really broad audiences, and radio allows them to reach 90% plus of their target audiences. So it's a really big reach extender especially as linear television kind of continues to decline and the reach of linear television continues to decline. Radio is a way that you can offset that reach. And the other factor that it cites is the efficiencies of radio. So radio can still be bought to some degree in the single digits for CPMs, where television can be going up to, as much as like $35 to $65 if you're going into broadcast. It can get quite expensive from a CPM perspective, and even connected television can be in the 20s pretty regularly on a CPM basis.
Oh, I mean, you look at Netflix's opening CPM, and we don't buy it here, but it's rumored to be $65 CPM for Netflix, which is really, really expensive to reach that audience. And you're right. We're in it. We buy radio. We see that the radio CPMs can be sub $5. And it's an effective way to reach a lot of people. People have said for years and years and years, oh, radio's dying. We still have radios. It is not dead. It is absolutely not dead. So, I think, P&G, they're doing something because it works. They're not spending that kind of money because it doesn't. I think it's really realistic that, all advertisers should have traditional terrestrial radio as part of their ad mix. I think, what happens here is they get caught up on the sexiness of a streaming campaign, right? It's measurable. You've got pixels, terrestrial radio is harder. Make no mistake, I'm not going to lie about that. It's harder to measure on a direct response basis, but, it is measurable. It's not going to be as directly measurable as something with a pixel, but it does work and it is efficient. And realistically, more of the advertisers out there should make sure that it's part of their media mix. Absolutely. Gary.
Yeah. I mean, from my perspective too, it's, there is a pretty good measure for radio, which is actually somewhat harder for other channels in audio, which is reach and frequency. So, I mean, that certainly is available. I know that's difficult when you're thinking about performance, right?
Right.
I can show you a reach frequency, but I can't really tell you how many people visited the website or took an action. However, there's a lot of the thought leadership in the industry, Bennett and Field, Byron Sharp, they talk about reach and the importance of reach. And so there is a measure for radio that we can still use, and it's called reach and frequency, and it's still a viable measure. It's just not going to prove out your performance, but it is going to help you understand how many people you're reaching, how often you're reaching them. And first and foremost, it's important to remember that we need to make people aware of our products. One of the ways to make people aware of our products is make sure we're getting advertising and messages in front of them, so we're reaching as many of the audience as we can.
So really then it comes down to managing client expectations in that regard. Like, yes, we can measure it. No, you're not going to see the direct correlation of like, oh yeah, these people for sure went to the website and they for sure took an action in the same way that you can in other more digital formats. But thoughts, Gary?
There's still a lot of cars on the radio. Or excuse me, on the road. There's still a lot of cars on the road. And in cars, everyone has a radio. Newer cars don't have CD players anymore. So I'm just trying to think, like, what else are they listening to? Radio, right?
Yeah.
And, before we started the agency, there was we came from radio, and it was like, tremendous reach, and you kind of forget that or sidestep that with the cool new flashy thing. But slow and steady wins the race, and there's still radio. Is the format going to change over time? Probably. Is the way people consume it changing? Absolutely. But it's true. It does reach a majority of the country, and you can target by different formats depending on the type of audience you're looking to reach. So I think, it makes sense if they're trying to reach an audience and trying to be effective and efficient. Why not go after radio listeners? And also, if you're P&G and you're selling a product at a store and you need dishwasher detergent or laundry detergent or soap, why not have that frequency, to make it top of mind? So when you do go to the store, you do hear the ad for Dove soap or for Clorox bleach or whatever it may be.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with their brands that they have and the mass reach of those brands, certainly, having that message kind of top of mind as you're going into a retail location can't hurt. I think the other thing about radio is when we've been looking at who are the top spenders in radio, and it's a lot of retail. And so those are companies that if they don't have somebody come into the location, they're not going to survive, right? So if McDonald's doesn't have people coming into their franchisees or going through the drive-through lane, they're not going to be in business too much longer. Same with the likes of Home Depot or Lowe's, which really advertise heavily on radio. So, the people that kind of have to prove out performance, because if they don't get people shopping in their stores, they won't survive, heavily invest in radio.
All right, so tell me if you've ever heard of any of these companies. Indeed, Shopify, NetSuite, Headspace, Quip, Theragun, Postmates. I'm not only the host of the Media Roundtable, but also CEO of a company called Oxford Road, and we are the world's leading independently owned and operated audio ad agency. And what that means is that we help great companies, many that you have probably heard of on some of the other podcasts that you listen to. We help them test and scale campaigns in audio channels, with podcast being one of those leading channels. Some of the work that we do includes media planning and buying, as well as analytics, attribution, and insights. And we also have a very special way that we deal with creative and copy generation. We have our own proprietary process called Audiolytics that allows us to score ads for their persuasiveness. If you're looking to be involved in audio and you want a partner that can help work with you to make sure that you achieve unprecedented ROI and massive scale, you should get in touch with us at Oxford Road. And by the way, the only reason that we're able to do the work of the Media Roundtable is because we have a great team at Oxford Road that supports us and makes it possible. So, what we're doing is not just a podcast, but we're really trying to help brands live out their values and balance that with their business objectives, which is an increasingly hard thing to do in this world of misinformation and malice that's infecting so much of our media. But at Oxford Road, we don't want to just broker this stuff. We want to impact the industry for good. We want to raise the bar on what gets created. And Oxford Road is helping make that possible through the Media Roundtable. So if you're somebody that's interested in working with an ad agency or a partner on this type of work for your advertising campaigns, go to oxfordroad.com. It's easy to spell. And get in touch with us, or at least just sign up for our free newsletter, The Influencer. That's oxfordroad.com.
This is Chris Howard, host of Plugged In with Chris Howard. The Kansas City Chiefs are heading to their fourth final in 5 years against a stacked San Francisco 49ers team. Not surprisingly, the Chiefs are currently a 1.5-point underdog. BetOnline is your number one source for up-to-the-minute odds, stats, trends, and lines. You can access the world's best wagering information from your desktop or your mobile device. Head to BetOnline today to stay updated on all the action. BetOnline, the game starts here.
Well, and didn't Edison Research release a series on terrestrial radio? What were the findings?
Oh, yes, they did. That's like our next section. Nice segue.
Good segue.
Nice, right? Right?
Yes, absolutely. So Edison Research, they just completed a 4-part series. Really, it was about radio, but it was in large part about how radio compares to streaming. And some of the key findings are radio is still the most popular audio format across all demographic groups, even younger audiences. I'll say that with a little bit like the younger audiences, maybe not quite as much. So, I mean, radio still gets about 33% of their ad-supported time. YouTube gets around 30%, 20% goes to streaming, and then 15% goes to podcasting. So in aggregate, radio isn't as popular among the 13 to 24 segment, but as a standalone channel within audio, it is still slightly ahead of YouTube, right? And then, they talk about time spent with radio is higher than streaming audio, especially when they talk about ad-supported streaming. They even talk about how much radio even leads listenership outside of the car. And then the digital side of AM/FM radio, the article, the last of their series talks about how the digital component still leads ad-supported streaming and time spent. That one, I'm like, really? I'm not quite sure if that's but maybe that's just my personal bias, and we all live and breathe in this industry. We're probably not the normal media consumer. So there's sometimes you gotta say, take yourself out of the picture a little bit and think about how the average consumer uses media. So there's that. So there could be truth there.
I think even that younger demo where radio is about what you said, 33%.
Yeah.
That's shockingly strong for a generation that's grown up pretty much with a cell phone in their hands. I think that's pretty impressive. So yeah, radio, not dead, not in the least.
People have cars. It's still a thing.
And people have cars that don't have access to CarPlay. Also,
Gary, you have a car. You have your phone in your car.
I do, but you know what? My car doesn't. It only connects Bluetooth for the phone, right? I still listen to the radio. I mean, I listen to satellite radio. I listen to AM radio, depending on the Laker game or the news or whatever. But I'm still listening to the radio.
You don't plug in? Your car doesn't do CarPlay?
No.
Really? See?
Yeah.
There you go.
I mean, one of the older cars I have, it has a cassette deck, and I have the cassette deck adapter for the CD player with a dongle that plugs into my phone. So I have my own Bluetooth for the 1982 car that I have, the classic. But does that count as AirPlay? have an Apple iPhone, so kind of, right?
No.
When you say a cassette in your car, I mean, that's pretty ancient.
Yeah, it is.
I will say my first car was in 1982, and the first thing I did was swap out the radio to ditch the cassette player for a CD player. So good on you for making that work.
Well, I think you talk about that. I mean, we think about cars and we think about the latest cars that are on the road, and the Apple AirPlay and the ease of connecting to Bluetooth and everything else. I think the U.S. car fleet is still around, is kind of at its oldest that it's ever been, because cars stay running much longer.
Right.
So if the average car, if you're talking about a 10-year-old car, you're not going to have all those things, right? So there are still a lot of people on the road that are driving in cars that don't have all the latest technology. Maybe there's fewer of those people in LA than there are in other parts of the country, because we're such a car culture. But there is that component that's at play as well.
I say bring back the boombox.
I still listen to CDs.
You still listen to what?
CDs.
Nice.
I listen to Spotify too. I love Spotify, but I still have CDs.
I still listen to that U2 album that I can't seem to get rid of from my phone. So when I do connect to Bluetooth on my in my car, that immediately comes on. And even every new version of the iPhone I get, I still retain that wonderful music.
Speaking of music, let's follow the money, shall we? Neal's next proposal is following the money in music creation. So hit us.
All right. I guess I have a lot this week, don't I?
You do. You really do. it's the Neal show today. It's basically how it's going, but we love it.
I'm tired of hearing my own voice. So
that was good.
NPR's Planet Money, they created a shell record label to really kind of delve into the music industry, kind of figure out how artists get paid for their content. They promoted, I think, a song from the 1970s, and they were trying to get it more airplay, and it was about inflation, which is very relevant in our time.
Super timely. Yeah.
And so they it was interesting. I mean, it's just a fascinating, it's actually like a 6-minute audio piece. You can read about it too. So it's a quick thing to kind of take in, but it's fascinating because they talk about things like stream share. So I just sort of naively thought that you play your music gets played on Spotify and you get paid by the number of streams, and learned that no, not really. That's not the case. It's actually the share of your streams that are played within that time frame that they're looking at. So even though they were able to, I think, get 1 million streams of this song, it still had like 0.1 or some ridiculously
they made $1,000 on it. $1,000, and I think it was the artist made 1,000. NPR made just under 400. So it really is fractional. But I want to point out that, it's rumored, I don't know how true it is, Mariah Carey gets $7 million every holiday season for that one song, All I Want for Christmas. $7 million. If that number is anywhere near true, think about how many downloads she has to have or plays during that period of time to make that much off of royalties. Like, just
we're all listening to Mariah.
It's massive. Massive. So
I thought the other thing is, I mean, they actually, and you hear, I mean, if you listen to the ad-supported version of Spotify, which I do because I work in advertising, I feel like it's important that I hear the ads. You do hear artists promoting their content and trying to get you to listen to their channel or whatever. So the NPR team spent $8,000 on ads on Spotify. I think it was 8,000, something like that. They got 68 listens from that activity.
That's a terrible return on investment.
Yeah.
They could use a new agency.
They need a new agency. They really, really do. I think, I mean, listen, it's not the same anymore where, you know, you try and drive plays of the songs in order to sell records, right? The record companies aren't really making money off of these plays anymore. No one's buying physical albums anymore. I mean, hardly even buying the full album on Apple Music. When you can just stream it? So at the end of the day, you know, I think a lot of the streaming music is really just driving people to go to the concerts, right? And that's really where all of the money is made now, is on these concerts that you can't even get tickets for if it's a Taylor Swift concert, right? But that's where the money is. It's not in these streams, not nearly.
Yeah, the last part of the piece, and it gets into the pay to play, or sort of the area of almost of payola, which, you know, way back in the day was an issue in the audio industry. But there are companies out there that will encourage people that have playlists on Spotify. They'll encourage those people to play your music. Likewise, the Planet Money team worked with some TikTok artists or influencers to play the music, and the norm would not be for those TikTok influencers to disclose that they were being paid to play the music, but the NPR team insisted that they did. So, you know, there's some gray areas that are interesting and maybe you know, maybe not quite all above board in terms of how people are getting their music played, especially if you don't have like the big record label behind you.
Well, and then you think about all of those, and this takes us back to TikTok, right? All of the music that's on TikTok for those snappy little dance numbers that people are doing and recreating, and they get to play that same song over and over and do that same dance over and over and over. Playing those songs and getting that earworm would drive people to stream the entire song, which then, so it's beneficial for those artists to make that available and not go after royalties on TikTok so that they can go after it on the streams later. So you really do have to kind of follow the money a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. And I'm sorry.
Follow the money. Follow the money.
Follow the money. Rounding us out. So AI. Let's talk about AI. I think we've talked about AI quite a bit this last season, but let's talk about it some more. There was a letter that went out last week where many people, including Elon Musk, have asked humanity to take a seat on AI development. Kind of a big deal for them to come out and say this, mostly because we don't know where AI is going. I mean, my husband has already said he's happy to welcome his AI overlords, but I am not so much the same. You know, AI is developing at a clip that's a little bit faster than we can really keep up with. So I think it makes a certain amount of sense to take a pause and figure out what safeguards are in place and how to move forward intelligently and safely. But at the same time, I do kind of question some of the people that have signed off on this letter, because it seems like they're like, hey, wait a second, I don't have my fingers in the AI pie and I need 6 months to catch up. Thoughts?
I want to hear Gary's conspiracy theories.
Well, I mean, again, think about it, right? You just said it. People want to catch up. People that are big tech people, tech investors, players in the space are telling everyone to hold up so they could catch up, right? Same thing with TikTok. People are opposed of TikTok because they have an interest in a competing platform. So is it going to be like Terminator 2 with the T-1000 walking the streets? Maybe. I saw this video on the internet the other day. There's a company out of the UK that developed a human-sized robot with AI intelligence, and someone touched the nose of the robot, and the robot visibly got annoyed and frustrated and like grabbed the person's hand and pushed the hand out of the way. And this company is AI, right? The robot did not know that the person's hand was going to go into its face. And it's just a little scary to think about, but you're not going to be able to control that. You know, if you put an end to it or try to get people to stop doing it, it's only going to make people want to do it more.
It's true. So we need to be nervous.
You can only worry about what you can control, right? Mm-hmm. You can only control your emotions. You can only control your nerves. I don't know anything about AI. I have ChatGPT, and it's fun and it's helpful, but I can't control what those guys are doing over there.
Well, ChatGPT is not self-aware. I think that's the big thing, right?
But think about, you can type in a question to ChatGPT and or ask it something, and it will tell you something that's, I mean, you might have to finesse it or change it up a little bit, but without having any context or anything at all, it's going to just give you a 180-word email or a 3-page paper. Someone was telling me the other day that their son or daughter is required to be in school to do their midterm papers because they are concerned, the teachers or professors are concerned that it's going to be done all on AI.
So that doesn't surprise me. I have a friend who's got a 13-year-old daughter in 8th grade, and she has said that some of the boys in her class have started to use ChatGPT to do their homework.
Yeah. I'm not shocked or surprised by that.
I wish it existed when I was in school. That'd be so much easier.
Yeah, but make sure you do some fact checking, because I recently used ChatGPT to try to summarize some articles, and I was like, no, I read the article. That's not quite right. So,
well, you have to finesse it and change it up a little bit. But the point I think I'm trying to make is think about what's available basically for free on the internet, right? Imagine what people are doing behind the scenes, what people are working on. They're already coming up, or they already have self-driving cars.
And that's not gone super well, I don't think.
Aside from that, but just think about the technology and think about the possible progression of that, right? In 5 years, what do you think it's going to be like?
I don't know.
I'm an optimist. I'm not going to go in with the conspiracy theories. So
I'm not saying it's a conspiracy. I'm just following the trend of technological advancement, right?
Yeah, like I don't think anybody expects Skynet in our lifetime, but I think that it's not outside the realm of possibility if it's let to go, like run amok, right? If we do this without thinking through all the possible implications, like it could exist.
I think that I was reading that the government has a drone that is in use that uses AI to determine if there's a possible threat that needs to be an issue.
I think that makes sense, right? Because it's algorithms that it's just, and it's scouring chatter and the internet and putting.
Well, no, it's flying around. It's a drone.
It's a drone
flying around in certain territories that uses AI to detect threats or possible hazards, etc.
But it's still an algorithm.
Right. But I'm saying, think about the progression, right? 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 8 years from now.
I think
I don't think the Terminator lifestyle is too far off.
I just need it to be like 60 years from now, and then I don't have to worry about it.
I saw a thing the other day that some scientists thinks the average human age is going to be up to 120 pretty soon, or 122.
Dude, I'm just trying to make it to 50.
What if instead of hybrid cars, we're going to be hybrid humans?
Bionic?
Could be the bionic team right here.
I feel like I support that. I do. All right. Well, I think that about wraps us up. We've touched on TikTok
on that note.
And radio and Skynet. Now I'm just going to have nightmares for the rest of the week. Thanks, guys. Thank you all for joining the Media Roundtable Industry Edition. This show is still dedicated to our mission of mobilizing marketers to advance truth and civility in journalism. We want you not just to know the news. but use it for good. Gary Brown. If you're a marketer looking to balance business objectives with your brand values, reach out to our agency, Oxford Road, by visiting oxfordroad.com and subscribing to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. Thank you to our guests and to Bianca, Kyle, Haley, and the team at Podcast One. As always, influence responsibly.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming, like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you're trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you need is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare, so it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at Progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.